Alex Lifeson confesses. Anika Nilles admits she wasn't a Rush fan before the call. The phone call that changed Anika Nilles' life did not come with a lifetime dream attached to it. For many musicians, receiving a call from a legendary band like Rush would feel like the moment they had been preparing for since childhood. They would instantly know every album, every deep cut, every legendary performance. But Anika Nilles' story was completely different. When the opportunity arrived, she was not a lifelong Rush superfan, waiting for her chance to step into rock history. She was a highly respected drummer with her own career, her own style, and her own musical identity. And that unexpected truth would become one of the most surprising details about Rush's return. For decades, Rush was built around the powerful chemistry between three musicians: bassist and singer Geddy Lee, guitarist Alex Lifeson, and the legendary drummer Neil Peart. But after Peart's passing in 2020, the future of Rush seemed impossible to imagine. Fans wondered if the band could ever return without the man whose drumming style had become one of the most respected in rock history. Then came the unexpected name, Anika Nilles. A German drummer known for her technical ability, creativity, and unique approach to rhythm, Nilles was not chosen because she tried to become Neil Peart. Instead, she was chosen because she brought something different to the table. But behind the scenes, the decision was far from easy. Alex Lifeson later admitted that the first rehearsals were uncertain. The question was not only whether Anika could play the difficult Rush songs, the question was whether the three musicians could create the same kind of connection that made Rush special for more than 50 years. And then came the detail that surprised many fans. Anika Nilles wasn't a Rush fan growing up. She respected the band. She knew the importance of Neil Peart. She understood the pressure of the situation. But she did not enter the room as someone who had spent her entire life memorizing every Rush song. Instead, she entered as a musician facing one of the biggest challenges of her career. And what happened during those rehearsals would determine whether Rush's legendary sound could continue. Because at first, even Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee were not completely convinced. When Anika Nilles received the invitation to audition for Rush, she understood the enormous weight behind the opportunity. This was not a normal band audition. She was stepping into a position connected to one of the most influential drummers in music history. Neil Peart was not just the drummer of Rush. He was considered by millions of fans to be one of the greatest rock drummers ever. His precision, creativity, and storytelling through rhythm helped define the band's sound for decades. Anyone taking his place would face impossible expectations. But Anika approached the situation differently. Instead of trying to copy Neil Peart note for note, she focused on being herself. Her career had already been built around her own musical voice. She had gained international recognition through her unique playing style, complex rhythms, and creative approach to the drums. For Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, that was one of the most important things they were looking for. They knew nobody could replace Neil Peart. The goal was never to find another Neil Peart. The goal was to find a musician who could honor Rush's legacy while bringing a new energy to the songs. But there was still a major challenge. Rush's music is famously complicated. The arrangements are filled with unusual time signatures, sudden changes, and demanding drum parts. Songs that fans have listened to for decades require incredible stamina and attention to detail, and Anika had to prove she could handle that pressure. During the early rehearsal process, she spent time learning the material and working closely with Geddy and Alex. According to interviews, the experience was emotional for everyone involved because these were songs connected to memories, friendships, and a band history that stretched back more than 50 years. For Alex Lifeson especially, the transition was complicated. He had spent decades creating music with Neil Peart. The connection between the two musicians was built over thousands of hours on stage and in the studio. Finding a new drummer meant opening the door to a completely new chapter, and at first there were doubts. Could someone who had not grown up as a Rush superfan truly understand what these songs meant? Could someone who wasn't trying to imitate Neil Peart still capture the spirit of Rush? Those questions followed Anika into the rehearsal room, but then something began to change. The more she played, the more Geddy and Alex started hearing something unexpected. Not a replacement, not a copy, but a musician who understood the heart of the music in her own way. And that realization would become the turning point in Rush's incredible comeback story. The moment Anika Nilles started playing alongside Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, the biggest challenge was no longer about proving she could play the drums. She had already proven that. The real challenge was earning the trust of two musicians who had spent decades building one of rock's most respected partnerships. For Geddy and Alex, every Rush song carried memories of Neil Peart. Every drum fill, every rhythm, and every performance was connected to their longtime friend and bandmate. That emotional connection made the decision incredibly difficult. Alex Lifeson later explained that the idea of returning to Rush without Neil Peart was complicated. It was not just about finding a skilled drummer, it was about finding someone who could step into a historic role while respecting the band's past. And this was where Anika Nilles' honesty became important. She never pretended to have a lifelong Rush obsession. Instead, she approached the music as a professional musician. She studied the songs, understood the responsibility, and focused on capturing the emotion behind the performances. That approach actually helped her. Rather than trying to become Neil Peart, she brought her own personality into the music. For many fans, this became one of the most interesting parts of the story. They were not looking for someone to erase Neil Peart's legacy. They wanted to see if Rush's music could still feel alive with a new creative force behind the drums. And Anika's style was different. Her playing combined technical precision with a more modern sense of groove and expression. She was known for adding her own interpretation while still respecting the structure of the songs. That balance was exactly what Geddy and Alex needed. During rehearsals, the three musicians began developing a new musical connection. The room that once carried uncertainty started becoming a place where new memories were being created. For Alex Lifeson, this was a major emotional step. After losing Neil Peart, returning to Rush meant accepting that the band could never be exactly the same. But perhaps it did not have to be the same. Maybe the future of Rush was not about recreating the past. Maybe it was about celebrating everything they had built while allowing something new to happen. And slowly, the biggest questions surrounding Anika Nilles began to disappear. The question was no longer, can she play Rush songs? The answer was becoming obvious. The bigger question became, can fans accept a new version of Rush? Because outside the rehearsal room, millions of fans were waiting. Some were excited, some were uncertain, and some were wondering whether anyone could ever truly follow in Neil Peart's footsteps. But when Anika finally stepped onto the stage, the world would get its answer. When Rush officially announced that they were returning to the stage with Anika Nilles behind the drums, the reaction from fans around the world was immediate. For many longtime Rush fans, it was an emotional announcement. This was a band that many people believed had already played its final chapter. After Neil Peart's death in 2020, Rush's future seemed uncertain. The idea of seeing Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson perform those legendary songs again felt almost impossible. But there was also a difficult reality. Whoever sat behind the drum kit would face comparisons that no musician could completely escape. Neil Peart's influence was enormous. His playing style shaped generations of drummers, and his performances became a defining part of Rush's identity. Anika Nilles knew the pressure was there. But instead of carrying the impossible responsibility of replacing Neil Peart, she focused on respecting the music and bringing her own musicianship to the stage. That was one of the reasons Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson felt she was the right choice. They were not searching for someone to recreate the past. They wanted someone who could help them move forward while keeping the spirit of Rush alive. Interestingly, Anika's lack of a traditional Rush fan background became less of a weakness and more of an advantage. Because she did not grow up trying to copy Neil Peart, she was able to approach the songs from a fresh perspective. She studied the details, she respected the arrangements, but she also allowed herself to play with feeling. And that was something Alex Lifeson noticed. After decades of performing with Neil, Alex understood that chemistry between musicians cannot simply be created by technical ability. A drummer can play every note correctly and still fail to connect with the band. What mattered was communication, trust, the feeling that everyone on stage was listening to each other. Slowly, that connection started forming. Anika was no longer just the drummer who had been chosen for a difficult job. She became part of a new musical conversation with two rock legends. But even after the rehearsals went well, one major challenge remained. The fans. Rush supporters are among the most dedicated audiences in rock music. Many had spent decades following the band, collecting albums, attending concerts, and celebrating the unique chemistry between Geddy, Alex, and Neil. Would they welcome a new chapter? Or would they reject it because it felt too different? The answer would come when the lights went down, the crowd erupted, and Anika Nilles took her place behind the drums for the first time as part of Rush's new era. And that moment would prove whether the band's legacy could truly continue. When Anika Nilles finally joined Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson on stage, the moment carried more than just musical pressure, it carried history. Every person watching knew what Rush represented. This was a band that had influenced generations of musicians, created some of rock's most complex songs, and built a legacy around the unique partnership between three extraordinary artists. Now, one seat had changed, but the mission remained the same: honor the past while creating something meaningful in the present. Anika understood that she was not walking onto the stage to erase Neil Peart's contribution. Nobody could do that. His creativity, songwriting, and legendary performances would always be a central part of Rush's story. Instead, she approached the role with respect. She focused on capturing the energy, emotion, and power behind the songs, rather than simply trying to recreate every moment exactly as Neil had played it. That mindset helped fans see something important. Anika Nilles was not pretending to be Neil Peart. She was Anika Nilles. And that difference mattered. Many musicians who followed Rush's journey recognized that replacing a legendary drummer is not about finding a copy. It is about finding someone who understands the responsibility while bringing their own identity to the music. For Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, that connection was the reason they believed she belonged there. The two musicians had spent decades sharing the stage with Neil, and they knew what real chemistry felt like. A drummer does not simply keep time in Rush's music. The drums are a major part of the storytelling. That is why the search was so personal. It was not only about skill, it was about trust. And over time, Anika earned that trust. Her journey from being a musician who admired Rush's legacy from a distance to becoming part of that legacy became one of the most unexpected stories in modern rock. The fact that she was not a lifelong Rush fan made the story even more fascinating. Instead of entering the band with years of emotional attachment, she entered with curiosity, professionalism, and a willingness to learn. She discovered the music in a new way, and in return, Rush discovered a new voice behind the drums. But one final question remained. After all the rehearsals, all the discussions, and all the uncertainty, what did Alex Lifeson truly think about Anika Nilles joining Rush? Because behind the scenes, his opinion carried enormous weight. He was not only a guitarist looking for a drummer. He was a musician saying goodbye to one era and opening the door to another. And his final thoughts about Anika would reveal why Rush believed they had found the right person for this impossible job. In the end, the story of Anika Nilles joining Rush was never just about finding someone who could play difficult drum parts. It was about finding someone who understood the responsibility of carrying a legacy. When Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee decided to continue performing as Rush, they knew there would be no easy path forward. Neil Peart's impact on the band was too powerful, and fans would naturally compare anyone who stepped behind the drums to the man who had been there for more than 4 decades. But the goal was never to replace Neil. The goal was to celebrate what Rush had created and allow the music to continue in a new form. That was where Anika Nilles made the difference. She did not arrive pretending to have the same story as Neil Peart. She did not claim to be the biggest Rush fan from childhood. Instead, she came as a respected musician with her own journey, her own style, and a deep respect for the opportunity in front of her. And that honesty became part of what made her connection with Geddy and Alex special. She was not chosen because she could imitate the past. She was chosen because she could help create the future. For Alex Lifeson, who had shared one of rock's greatest partnerships with Neil Peart, accepting a new drummer was an emotional decision. It meant accepting that Rush's next chapter would sound different. But different did not mean wrong.